IVM.
Hello and welcome to Simblified, the greatest podcast to come out of Malad West, as we have often spoken about. In this particular episode, again, another rare episode where all four of us are present. Hi, everyone.
Hello.
What's up?
That is an enthusiastic panel. So one of the questions I have been pondering of late, folks, and as is my habit, when I ponder these questions, I bring them to the most sagacious bunch of people who I know. And since those guys were closed, I came to you. So I was thinking, during the last couple of years, right, or rather the 2 years before that, we were all saying, COVID has changed everything and is this thing, that thing, and work has changed and supply chains have changed, technology has changed, nothing is ever going to be the same again and things. And then slowly, I don't know. But slowly, I kind of see things going back to where they were. And I don't necessarily mean this in a good way or a bad way. And much of what we went through from 2020 to, say, mid-2022 seems like it's in the distant past. And that's a good thing, I suppose. But there were also a few good things. And while we were there, and we've done episodes on this so many times, like, this has completely changed and e-commerce has changed forever and this has changed forever and all that. So I just thought I would bring it to you folks and ask you, what do you think? Do you think that, anything has actually happened? And I think now is a good time to ask this, because it's still not like we are still out of the COVID woods. As of today, there were still 90 new fresh cases of COVID in India yesterday. And I assume that number is 100,000 or something in the US. Goodness knows what that country is all about.
Or it's 100,000 in India because the numbers are not reported.
Spoken with the confidence of somebody who does not, the country who is. Yeah. And, but at the same time, it's also far enough for us to, have sort of medium-term historical perspective on this. I'd like to think that, 10 years later is when we'll form a full perspective. So I just thought I'd check in with you guys and ask, so where do you think we are? What has changed? What remains the same? So yeah, that's all.
Can I go first?
Yes, yeah. Please.
Yes.
So,
you look like you have an answer prepared.
So some things have not changed at all. Life goes on. And this is yet another thing that happens, right? So we've had some life-threatening situations, alarm, panic, and then things resolved itself. Some people tragically passed away, but most people didn't, and everything turned out to be good. But some things changed, I think, irrevocably. So among those, one is the way we communicate. So it really accelerated remote communication in a way that could have been possible several years ago, but didn't, because it was, all the technology, everything was there, but there wasn't any need. And all of a sudden now that people have, just the other day, I had to meet someone in Andheri, which is literally 9 or 10 km from here. And I chose to do a Zoom because, who's going to go? Yeah. So that would have been unthinkable for me, at least, line of work that I am, manufacturing. And so technology also kept place. So one is that. One is the ability of people to get along without physically interacting with other people. So that's one thing that has changed. And the other thing I think is, what else? That's one thing that I really think has changed.
Let's talk about that itself, right? I think because that's a pretty profound thing. So there are two angles that we could go from there. One is the impact on work itself. And I ask this because increasingly companies are now asking people to come back to office and all that. In some sense, it's like, till about last year, there was this whole thing about, hey, hybrid is where it's going to be. And even now, while that's still the case, I'm still seeing like many offices wanting to call people back to the office and things like that. So it's almost like even though we know we can work remotely, it's not happening. And then the second thing is, Naren, is maybe slightly larger and slightly more profound, is I think the world has sort of, at least me, if not the world, a renewed sense of appreciation for the physical, if that makes sense. Going out and actually seeing things in
private. That is a corollary. The other side of yin and yang thing. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think
so. You don't want to meet people, but meeting people becomes more valuable.
Yeah, so one is meeting people and one having shared experiences, like going to a theater. And for the two of you, Tony and Srikeit, I'm assuming going to a actual game becomes all the more meaningful. I know that I felt it for sure when I went back to even small concerts in Bombay. You could see that renewed sense of, Acha, okay, like it took the last 2 years to teach us how much this meant to us, that sort of
You
thing.
value it more. You tend to value
You
it
end up
more.
valuing it more, yeah. And you place more of an emphasis.
Very Catholic principle of like denying yourself pleasure.
Yeah.
Anyway,
No, I
It's
think that's
we had a chastity belt and like a whip with us for 3 years to.
Oh
feeling a
man,
little better.
you went dark, man. You went full Opus Day over there.
putting the day.
Putting the day
Hey.
in Opus Day.
I said it first. I said it for exact same lines also. Okay, but yeah, so that's one. So I guess suppose the.
No, I mean-
how's it been for you guys? Like the renewed sense of the physical, going out, meeting people only when you want to, making more of an event whenever you go out in some sense.
So it's been two different. I mean, for me, it's been a very distinct break in some ways. Where I've experienced the pandemic in 3 different countries, right? So I've experienced it in Malaysia, which the core of the pandemic was there. Then I experienced it in India, and now I'm experiencing the post-pandemic era effectively in Canada. And having seen it across that, and I only want to focus on the post-pandemic effectively right now, and period that I've kind of spent in India and Canada right now. I mean, in India, the one thing that was there was, it also comes down to the experience that I was personally going through. I wasn't working with any organization. I was staying in Bangalore, at my parents' place, which was far away. So effectively, it was like a continuation of the pandemic for me. I wasn't really venturing out much anymore, anywhere, and I was mostly home. But since I've come to Canada and like experienced the life over here, it's like there is a sense of there's a lot of remote working that happens, and a lot of people have adapted to that. And there's like actually like protests, and people are quitting because they are told to come back like more than 2 times a week or something like that. Like people are doing all of that kind of stuff. But also there is like a huge push to like, people are always saying this, that you know what, a physical meeting is worth a lot more than a virtual meeting.
Yeah.
Right? In the sense that even though the conversation might be the same, if you are, like, for example, if you're
The
especially...
porn industry may not agree, but...
that is definitely the case. Wow. But here, I was having a couple of conversations with a couple of people that I was working with remote. I was working part-time remotely over here with some people, and they were like, when we are trying to... So it's more of a recruitment or sales kind of role. And they're like, our conversion rates for in-person meetings are a lot better than the virtual ones, even though we're making the same pitch, because of the small talk, and the people like see us as real people. And this kind of relates to our previous conversation about consciousness in some way, where it's all about what is real and what is not. And like a virtual, because during the pandemic, and we've gotten so used to actually completing full days of work, speaking to actually multiple sets of people, but through the same window and like through like the same boxes of faces that we speak to, that we tend to like kind of bunch them together, and they're a lot more easily forgettable in some ways, or a lot less valuable, versus an in-person meeting where I think the ephemera of the conversation actually turns out, it's brought to focus how much that ephemera of the conversation or the in-person element of conversations or the small talk, so to speak, as we have been doing, how valuable that is to actually like making a conversation memorable or standing out or like valuable in any such way. So I think that's one thing that's really stood out for me in some ways over here, where I know of a lot of people who came to Canada when the pandemic was on, right? And like some people who landed in the peak of the pandemic and like entered the country and lived in lockdown for 6 months. And I can't even imagine what that life could be like, because especially when you're landing in a new country and when you're looking to like start your life in a new country in some way or the other, you really feel that you need that connection to the physical, right? You need to see that your life has really changed and the context of your life has really changed in some way or the other. And going and seeing physical places, taking a walk outside, breathing the different air, feeling the different weather than the weather that is there inside your temperature controlled unit. I think all of those actually make the experience real and make you kind of like adjust to the move and like make it more comfortable for you to understand that, okay, I have now relocated and kind of realized that. So a lot of people, like a friend of mine also who's been here for a year, but who keeps leaning on me to take her out to different places because she's like, dude, I moved here during the pandemic. I never went anywhere. You are seeing more of this world. So kind of like take me along because I have like lost the ability to kind of like go out now. You know, like, because my default is to stay indoors and I mean, it's almost like the world scares her a little bit,
right.
You know? So, yeah, I mean, I think those are certain changes that have come through the psyche of human beings through this pandemic. And I think that venturing out seems to mean a lot more in very different contexts. I mean, I'm not saying that working at home is a bad thing or staying at home and like that's a great revolution, but like you said, a lot more value to venturing out.
A lot more value, and we definitely see this with travel, right? There's this whole so-called the post-pandemic travel boom that's happening. I definitely saw it when I went to Thailand, and we're just seeing it in general on our Instagram feeds, right? I think people are just desperate to get out and just appreciate the world out there and stuff like that. And I suppose everything that you're saying can be extrapolated to every situation, from work to concerts to watching a match live. Like concerts is a big one for me. Like during the pandemic, you guys will know I was a huge proponent of these virtual concerts and all that, but even I got tired of them after a while because the distraction is so there. You don't feel like you're completely in the moment. Concerts, you really want to connect with other folks around you rather than, you know, just listen to the band. So all that was missing. And in a way, I won't lie, like even this podcast itself, those few episodes where we four of us got together and actually recorded in the studio, the energy was like off the charts, right? We were just spitballing ideas a lot more freely and things like that. So so that convenience versus, I don't know, real. To throw back again to the consciousness episode. Yeah. Tony, you have been silent all this while, and usually that means you have
one bomb of
because that glow is already for your listeners can't see this, but Tony has a glow around his head, which usually means.
No. So, I mean, I saw this really funny but profound line on my TL. I forgot who posted it. I think it's like probably one of my reasonably closer friends, but I don't remember who it was. But basically the line said that 2023 is when we dress up to go to physical offices to attend virtual meetings, right? What has happened is that in the last 2 to 3 years, we thought all of this is here to stay, and we went all out and hired everyone from all corners of the globe. Right? It didn't matter, like you could perpetuate this forever. But now that it's 2023, it's not like you can suddenly reconfigure your entire teams and have them physically meet in the same city or same space or whatever. So it's a little funny when you go into office and actually like you are on Teams or whatever calls that is there happening, right? And you're like, how did we ever do this before? Because there are like 7 other people on different Teams calls, just like yelling at the top of their voice, right? You always were pretty much at home and you had a corner to yourself and you could shush your family when this thing was happening, but not anymore.
On that note, sorry, just a interjection over there, like hybrid meetings where half the team is in office and half the team is at home is just a farce at this point.
Horrible.
It is just an absolute farce. Like it cannot be tolerated. But anyway, please continue, Tony.
So the outcome of this has been, I think, again, probably we don't see it, but disproportionately, like women are starting to leave workplaces during the pandemic, right? Because they had like taken on dual roles, or unfortunately, but that's the case. But I think the one distinction that has happened pre-COVID and post-COVID to all of this is that I think there is a nuance to sort of physical meetings now, right? And not every physical meeting is the same. Right? Like some things are transactional. I still don't want to go into my bank at any point. I don't want to meet anyone from the bank, for instance, right? Or if I were probably a coder who's fresh out of college, I still don't deem it entirely necessary for that person to go into a physical workspace, right? I think what organizations are grappling with is the fact that given that we've gone through this massive period of unaddressed grief, which is basically what COVID was. I don't think anyone's resolved the trauma around COVID or addressed it as such. Is that to find purpose or meaning in life suddenly means that you need a heavy dose of office physicality, right? And rituals around it to sort of get employees to stay loyal to it. But employees are like, fuck you, we won't come, right? Like, why do we need to come into office? So I think that's an interesting dynamic that is playing out, wherein actually employees who go into work will find it more meaningful, even if it's like thrice a week or so. Because
do you think that
find
so
the
I
ritual around coffee?
No, I absolutely agree with you over there. Do you think, however, that need for just leaving aside what it means for work, right? You're feeling closer connected to your workplace and all that. What do you call the creative collisions and all that sort of thing? Leaving that aside, do you think some of what you're saying, that need for physicality, can be addressed by the so-called third spaces rather, like a park or say a public event like a show or a sports event, or just going to theater and just mingling with people who are not, you have either your family or your work, and just seeing people and interacting with people from different backgrounds and things like that. Do you think that satisfies that human need to some extent?
I think that need exists. Sorry, I'll go first and just wanted to make a point here. I think that need exists. What I feel, and this is my opinion, I'm not speaking for everyone here, but I feel that need exists on multiple dimensions. That need, I think every aspect of our life which is important to us, I think we have a need to socialize with the people in that particular aspect.
Right.
Yeah. So, for example, if I have, I'm going to the third place with a bunch of my friends who are not related to my work, all right, or like the four of us are going after this thing and going for a drink afterwards, right? Yes, it's almost like, if I don't know if you guys have played Sims, right? Sims used to have a social meter, right? It had like this social meter, and you could just basically call anyone and your social meter starts filling up, right? You can do it over the phone, you can do it in person, you can just call people over, you can sit and talk to anybody and your social meter will increase. And if you don't talk to anybody, your social media will decrease. I think that's it's a gaming it was an old gaming mechanic. So it's a very linear way of kind of looking at how social meters work. But I think like if you're interacting with people across, if you're interacting significant amount of time with people without having any kind of physical meeting with them, and this is my experience of it, is that relationship can only grow to a certain extent.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I completely agree.
This is my experience. I'm sure people have made meaningful connections by completely being apart, and all that stuff may have happened for people. But from my perspective, I feel there is a cap on how much that relationship can grow. And I feel like I would actually flip it the other way. I'd say that relationship has the potential to really grow if that physical meeting can happen even a couple of times,
Yeah.
And I think that's where like this whole, like I know this for a fact that especially at my old office, I think they instituted like Wednesdays was mandatory for everyone to come. And even those who wanted to work remotely would really look forward to Wednesdays because it was the day they could meet everyone. And that was Wednesday would actually be a low work day because everyone's just meeting and talking to each other and catching up about what happened over the whole week. And it actually like increased morale a lot.
Yeah.
Right.
Even if it was not related to work per se, right?
It wasn't related to work per se, but it improved the relationships and the camaraderie of people. When you are doing those calls, you are more willing to kind of do that call and like have that kind of the barriers breaking with that other person, and that sense of teamwork improves and all that stuff. So a lot of those intangibles would get refreshed.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, so what you're kind of saying is that like when you live your life completely online, right, be it for work or be it for recreation, there's a certain sense of curation that you do. And there is only so much your depth for each of these things can go from there, right? It's almost like you need to go out and you need to make those mistakes and all that, so that you yourself can find out, discover more about yourself and figure out where the chinks in the armor really are in that sense. But you're right. I think more of these deeper connections come when, there's a saying in advertising, right, Skinny, like two people in advertising can bond only when they bitch about the common client. And that won't happen over Zoom. That happens only when you are frustrated or you go to over a drink in the smoking room. Yeah, absolutely. Or just generally when a lot of these connections connections are forged. We know this, right? When the meeting is actually done, when
exactly.
When everything over. Here, there is no time for a post-meeting conversation because you're immediately hopping onto the next Zoom or Teams meeting.
Precisely, the corridor conversation and those the corridor conversation is what was really lost, and that corridor conversation often. The thing is, I think a lot of the senior leaders have kind of understood that. These are the things that don't sit in a timesheet. These are the things that won't be logged on Salesforce, right? These are not those, but they are essential parts of how organizations work. And I think part of the drive of trying to get a lot of employees, of course, there are a lot of those slave driver employees who are trying to get employees back in the office so that they can oversee the work that they do and all that shit, which is anyway there. But a lot of this, you've understood that removing all of these aspects has actually, while efficiency has improved. I think one thing, I can only speak from my industry point of view, and a couple of leaders I've spoken in my advertising industry who have said this, that while everyday work, so it's servicing a regular client, can be done really well by continuous remote working, coming up with a breakthrough idea, pitching a new idea, pitching something fresh or building something new, that activity is particularly difficult. I'm not saying impossible, particularly difficult to accomplish entirely online. That is where that ferment of a physical meeting is required.
Absolutely. So maybe one way of summarizing what you and I have been duologuing for a while now is 60% work can be done very efficiently over Zoom, but getting to 80 or 100, it's kind of difficult to do that, and you need that sort of random spark that can only come with physicality.
Right.
Yeah, there is also this thing about, I remembered this from an episode of Yes, Prime Minister. So there is this political advisor, Jim Hacker's political advisor named Dorothy Wainwright. So Dorothy sits outside the cabinet office and the civil service comes up with his office reorganization plan, and they want to banish her to another wing of the building. And so Hacker signs off on it, and then she comes, Jim, you can't put me, and basically a long and straight says, I have to be opposite the loo. So Hacker says, have you seen anyone about this? Says the gents loo. Says nearly everyone in the cabinet is a man. And if I'm opposite the loo, I get to hear everything they say to each other whenever they pop out of cabinet meetings for a pee. So I was able to keep the last Prime Minister fully informed of all their little foibles. And Jim Hacker says, was it any of his business? When they were plotting against him, yes. And then Dorothy gets her old place back. So that post-meeting conversation bit, it's pretty vital, because often in the formal construct of a meeting, a lot of people, this is my experience, keep quiet. They don't say what they want to say. And they privately sound you out so they want to say it in a meeting. And this is, I think, very important outlet for a lot of ideas, for a lot of feelings, suggestions and everything. And that's somehow lost in the non-physical world of virtual meetings.
Ironically, when remote working started becoming a thing in mid-2020, many people said that it will finally give the introverts a chance to get their voice heard. It's kind of interesting how everything is sort of flipped again, right? Yeah. Tony, you have been silent for a while, so...
No, just to round up on the transactional point, right? As much as people want to travel, I don't think anyone's very keen to spend their time in security check in an airport, right? Or if I want to get my groceries, I am no longer, just because I can see a person stepping out of the house to buy something. Instamart still works brilliantly. So I think there's been the transactional parts, at least for me, will remain completely online as much as possible. But any new person who wants to meet also, I'm a little bit more likely to spend time and effort and meet people or groups of people and enjoy. Obviously, games in a stadium is something that we missed terribly, and being back at the Wankhede for a international game or two was spectacular. So I think a lot more value to sort of these subtler aspects rather than the transactional ones. Maybe.
Naren, when you were saying this, reminded me of a creative of mine when who I used to brief at one point of time. He used to always be whenever we used to have proper creative briefings, sessions where we are actually briefing the creative, he would like sit around and be absolutely quiet. Like he was a senior creative and he would be absolutely quiet and not say a word. And then at the end of the meeting, he'd be like, chai peene chalna. And he would take me down. We'd sit over a chai and he's like, "Ye moti baat kya hai mujhe bata." Like tell me what the fucking crux of the brief is. Moti baat mujhe abhi bata. Ab
In
mujhe
fact,
sunna hai.
that is such an Indian way of working, right? So people find it difficult to be upfront and confrontational.
Yeah.
Even when they feel strongly about something, and yet they find it very important to be heard, right? Because whatever So no, I'm just curious to know if there have been any studies regarding.
I wanted
this.
to ask Chuck, what is your sort of freelancing experience been? COVID
With respect to remote or just the effect of COVID on
generally, yeah.
If you look at
Have clients been
sense,
wanting to meet or anything?
Oh, like that. Okay, so in a weird kind of way, I'd like to think that the pandemic was kind of good for my, for what I did, because I launched a course just when the pandemic was starting and everybody was thinking digital, and I think I hate to say this, but benefited greatly from that, and that obviously had a ripple effect, right? Because once you start a course, people automatically think, "Acha, if you can run a course on this, then you can probably help my company out or whatever." So that is still happening. Do clients want to meet? No, not really. I'll be very honest, because I think most of the kind of work that we do is very much still remote work kind of setup. I know I can't speak for the industry as a whole, because it would be very different if, say, a large agency like an Ogilvy or a Burnett were involved, because there involves a larger team. You're pitching larger ideas to a larger team. For me, a lot of the work I do is with one or maximum two people, and who are already comfortable working on Slack. So I work with a lot of design teams and things like that. And as it is, their work happens on Slack. We have had physical meetings. Interestingly enough, Srikeit, you and I were part of one of those meetings together. And it was interesting. It was kind of nice meeting people physically. But again, one of the reasons I decided to shift cities was because, hey, it's not like we were sitting and meeting people in any case, so might as well get out of Bombay and all that. So to answer your question, I haven't experienced it, but I know I can't speak for everybody else, right? Because not everybody works in the same kind of way. I do know some friends of mine who are happy now that they could work remotely and go back to their hometowns, but now had to come back because clients were demanding it or the offices were demanding it or whatever the case may be. But overall, if you're saying from an overall level, pandemic and all that, I think I was very comfortable working remotely in any case. That's what I was doing for a year before COVID came in. And I think that has just continued for me. The one, interestingly enough, though, I was teaching at a university which had to stop because they were mandating a return to physicality. So yeah, that was the one place it was kind of affected. But apart from that, no, not really.
One point on what you've kind of said, and Chuck, you're already a pioneer of this phenomenon. So I just read about this phenomenon today called supercommuting. And so supercommuting basically is this phenomenon where, an example of it was just recently done that there was a girl who got an internship at Ogilvy Health in New York. And the internship obviously paid. There was a paid internship, but you can imagine how much interns are getting paid. And the cost of living in New York has just gone out of control at this point of time. And so from her perspective, she actually did the math and discovered that, and she needed to be in office 1 day a week on Wednesdays. And all her classmates who also got internships similarly started hunting for apartments and doing all of that stuff. She instead decided that, and she did the math and figured out that it's actually cheaper to fly into New York from South Carolina, Charleston, South Carolina, where she stays, once a week and attend office than to do anything else. So she actually saving, and they actually did the math that she's apparently saving like close to $2,000 a month just doing this. So, and like also similarly in like Toronto and the GTA here, the Greater Toronto area here is it's also pretty similar where people are now actually like a lot of offices are now including as part of their packages where they're like, you can always, you can have your cottage month. So the very popular phenomenon over here is to go to a cottage in the country and work from there, right? So as long as this thing right now is that you can actually take, as long as you're going to be in the same time zone or maximum a Pacific time zone, which is 3 hours behind, you can actually take 2 hours of 2 months of remote working from that. But it's no longer about like the distance, but it's about the time zone. So it's like if you're going to be in the similar time zone or in a compatible time zone, then you can kind of work like that. So those are some phenomena that are coming up now.
Yeah, it's quite interesting, right? How some of these post-COVID work behaviors are kind of working out that way. One thing I was thinking of is how, like even during the pandemic, when all the software like say Zoom and all the listed companies, they were just like going completely off the charts. But you didn't need to be a genius to realize that this can't continue forever. Like even if you're going to continue doing remote work, it's not like the need for Zoom is going to like sustain like this. So in a way, I mean, I don't think anybody was surprised when that whole crash happened, but it made me think of larger things like what are the businesses of the future really going to be built on? Yeah, I know that AI and all that is a separate conversation by itself, but it makes me think, okay, have we passed peak software in some sense? Like, and are the businesses of the future really going to be about the more physical things again? I think it goes back to what we were saying with respect to physical and all that, but it might also be because one thing that's always fascinated me about Shark Tank, both US and India, is that not too many services are actually pitched. It's always physical stuff that's pitched. Whereas in the news, but whereas if you follow like whatever an Inc. 42 or Money Control or whatever, it's all about this SaaS company started Your Story and all that is all about the software thing. So that kind of dichotomy has always interested me. Plus with all the stuff that's happening with semiconductors and of course AI and all that, right? It makes me think about what the businesses of tomorrow are going to be. And I don't mean like the $1 trillion companies. Like, what are people going to start? Are they going to start physical things? Are they going to start making better chips, or are they better chips? Or are they going to, try and make software? This is something like I've thought about. Or are people really going to now start getting into creating content? Or maybe that's, we see what's happening with that. Maybe we've hit peak content, which is another interesting pandemic fallout, right? With so much investment into content creation, and now everybody's sort of like laying down low, saying, okay, we've passed peak TV and stuff like that. So it makes me think there are so many things that have peaked possibly during the pandemic. And what does that really mean for the future of business, entertainment?
The first thing that needs to die, needs to die is QR codes instead of physical menus.
Oh man!
Once we get rid of that in restaurants, I think we can breathe a sigh of relief.
I'm a fan of that.
No, but you're right. Actually, Tony, in some extent, I've seen this at some restaurants over here where people were actually getting the thing is in Canada, the one thing that happens is because of the tipping culture, every part of the experience gets reflected in the tip, and that's why the efficiencies of it improve very quickly. So like for example, here I used to go to this ramen place that from COVID had switched over to a QR code menu, and everyone was getting annoyed with the QR codes, and I think that reflected in the tips after a while. And I went back there like last month and they had like haphazardly on A4 sheets printed and stapled together a menu that they were keeping over there because everyone was getting annoyed with scanning the menu online and all that stuff. So the physical menu was already getting dog-eared because everyone's using that only. So yeah, you're right. I mean, there are certain things that are physical. I mean, especially when you're interacting with the space in a physical context, like a physical menu is something like a lot of people seem to want. But yeah, I mean, that's definitely one aspect that I see. But yeah, go on.
Yeah, no, I think Naren probably can speak about this, but like one aspect that was properly disrupted during COVID was the entire supply chain and globalization and things around that, right? So I don't know if there is an impact to that and how we will see that going forward.
So one big thing that is happening, at least in India, is rationalization and streamlining of the entire logistics process. So just like pre-pandemic, okay, if you wanted to send anything, you were battling with, you get your local transporter to carry it. There would be, border checkposts across states, so on and so forth. And now you have a lot of seamless, part of it due to the GST regime, which has forced the entire logistics industry to become far more streamlined, because otherwise, it's very difficult for the government to collect cash or documentation. And once they got that level of streamlining into their paperwork, they've seems to have filtered in, percolated into their operations as well. So I see a lot of industries being built around that. So that being taken to, like Tony was saying about transactional stuff which you want. So one of the things that many of us would not mind is not going to buy staples. Right, so whatever staples you need, fine for clothes and things that you don't need, but what things that I include things like televisions, radios, and not radios, whatever, televisions and mobile.
Wow, you're struggling to think of a follow-up to radio. I'm just saying, wow, vinyl players.
Follow-up to radio's podcast.
Electrostatic headphones. All right. Electrostatic headphones. Chal, let's go.
Yeah. So a lot of that is likely to happen in India, is what I think. And so it's all very closely intertwined with software and, management and things like that. But yeah, somehow I sense that there is something going to happen in that area. Yeah.
Positively, negatively?
Positively. It's going to be... See, eventually... a lot, one overarching theme of the last century is automation, right?
Right, yeah.
So at the turn of the century, people used to make cars by hand. They would make one car a month. And Ford came and changed that. He started making like 1 million Model T Fords. And this started extending to everything. So... I'm talking about the manufactured goods segment. And they started becoming mass-produced, they started becoming automated, they started getting cheaper. And because they were cheaper, more people afford them and so on. And then it also extended to a lot of non-manufactured things as well. Interactions, internet, telephony, everything started. So when more and more things get automated, there is less and less for people to do in that space. So then they have to find something else. So they have to keep... And every now and then, you'll have a lull in something till somebody discovers some new thing. So there'll be a lull when everyone is like, it's a recession, we don't know what to do, no jobs available, this, that, and the other. And suddenly a completely new dimension comes up and starts. So... We had this startup madness, partly fueled by the fact that there was a lot of cheap money available, but also because there were some very dramatic improvements in technology. So people are still, those improvements are still there. So people are still figuring out what to do. I was just reading something about tokenization today in the finance world. So it seems that the banking industry is on its verge of being turned around on its head. So I won't pretend to know what these guys are talking about, but it's
something is happening.
Something is happening.
That's the revolutionary. Naren, what about small business?
Nobody said the blockchain.
Sorry?
Nobody said blockchain.
What about small businesses in India, right? I'm sure quite a few of them.
Yeah, so we are, manufacturing industry is, the infamous K-shaped recovery. So some sectors are doing really well and some sectors are doing very badly. Okay, that's because society seems to have stratified into two layers, and there is a big bottom layer which is so poor that they've basically stopped consuming anything. They're just consuming rice and a few, electronic essentials like cell phone and all, and nothing else. So things which they can grow and a little money, and then they don't have anything else to buy. So someone is telling me that Hindustan Lever has been reporting, or Unilever has been reporting a big drop in their sales because people have just stopped using soaps of all description. So rural people realize that you don't need to use soap at all. So
you don't. Oh wow. It's not that.
So no detergent, and it affects the entire industry. It's not just levers. It's every industry is. I don't know what it is of late, because I am told that there have been a lot of direct benefit transfers. The government has given a lot of money to people directly. Plus, there has been all that, Manrega, Mahatma Gandhi, rural, whatever that thing is. So all those things are happening. So a lot of money is trickling down into poor people's hands far more efficiently than it was trickling down before. But a lot of small businesses, a lot of small industries have closed down for various reasons. One is GST regime and, a lot of stuff that was happening. The other thing is it's far more, you get much better quality goods and services from a large provider. So that's what's happening.
What happened to someone who was making, let's say, masks or COVID kits during?
Yeah, those guys, a lot of them were doing side hustles. A few people, might have set up dedicated factories. One thing I know, there was a small factory near our place, which at that time, for some reason, decided that there was a great deal of money to be made in paper plates. Because they figured, I don't know what the logic was. So that guy went and bought some machinery to make paper plates and everything like that. And he did well during COVID because for some reason, people didn't want to wash or, if they wanted to have get-togethers, they were using. And that seems to have vanished. So recently when I passed that place, there was a big lock. So I assume he's gone out of business or,
One thing I was thinking of during the pandemic and would really like to get your experience on this is our relationship with health in general, right? There was a time when we were all obsessively, we have built some habits, I suppose, because of the pandemic, like washing hands properly and all that, and maybe even to another level where many people just took care of their own fitness and were more mindful about what they ate and just basically understood all these things a little more and all that. At least I've definitely seen it in kind of like my circles, and I know for a fact that a lot of it was triggered because of the pandemic and all that. Just curious to know, what do you guys have? What have you experienced, especially now? Do you still see people kind of interested in all that?
One supplementary question, in your experience, is anyone wearing masks anymore? Or
No, not at all.
No, there are people. You know what? Curiously, there are. You see them in public places. You see them on trains. You see them on flights, and apparently that is because a lot. And so you can make out from people who wear masks who is watching these sensational TV news channels and who's not. So apparently those guys, every now and then, they try to whip up a COVID frenzy for whatever.
Well, honestly speaking, I have often considered when I go out cycling, wearing a mask only because of dust. In fact, I used to wear N95 masks when I used to cycle before in Bombay, purely for dust, before it became, before it became a thing.
You were doing it before it was cool.
Yeah, let's not say that. I wanted to say that, but let's not say that. But yeah, masks in general, I think,
related data-based thing that I wanted to sort of touch upon was that basically because of how weird these last 2-3 years were, most recent survey, this is in the US, is confidence in science fell drastically amongst common people, right?
No, so actually here as well, yesterday I went for an event in, it was a transit advocacy event that I went for yesterday. And there were, and that event was interesting because it was actually one with people from all ends of the spectrum. It was a proper common, so you had right-wing people, left-wing people all together discussing transit as a topic. And there's a mayoral election that's happening now. So the city is quite politically charged right now. When we were there, I actually saw an argument break out in one corner where a right-wing person was offended by a left-wing person wearing a mask. Right. The fact that they were wearing a mask, and it has become a very political issue in North America, because again in Canada as well, to a lesser extent, because of the truckers protest. I don't know if you guys followed that, but there was a truckers protest over here as well. And that is actually a big spark for a lot of the right-wing movements in Canada as well. And that truckers protest has actually given rise to a lot of people saying that, those who are wearing masks are furthering a propaganda, and there are people who want to wear masks for various reasons. I mean, right now there are some people are just genuinely, I mean, they're scared about COVID and that's their prerogative to do that. Other people have also understood. I mean, if you also were to still continuing following the science, it's just good sense now. And this is actually a pretty prevalent practice prior to the pandemic in Southeast Asia. Actually experienced this, was that if at any point of time you have a sniffle or you have a sore throat or you have any sort of that thing, you wear a mask out of courtesy to other people so that you don't cough on them and stuff like that, right? So this was actually quite common in Malaysia as well before the pandemic, that people would wear masks if they had so anyone wearing a mask is actually ill. So you kind of stay away, and it's like a marker that, okay, I'm not like perfectly fine. Maybe I might have some kind of thing. So you stay away from me kind of thing. So people wearing masks were of that description who also wear masks around here. So, I mean, it's pretty like that, but also it become a political statement where those who are like wearing masks are like, and even now, I mean, there was on a flyover over here, said that those who are, I mean, they keep increasing the timeline. First, some dude said that those who took the vaccine will die in 2 years. Now they've increased that to 4 years. So they'll keep increasing it as long as the vaccine is supposed to be taken. So
so interestingly, this survey was speaking about, right? And there is a very sharp divide between Republicans and Democrats in how they responded. So this is 2022 survey, Democrats' confidence fell to 53% in terms of great deal of confidence in scientific community. It was 55%.
Oh, wow.
2% drop.
Okay.
But Republicans' confidence dropped from 45% to 22%.
Oh,
so it's been hugely polarizing in that sense, right? In terms of medicine and scientific community. And there was this, basically, I think one of those meetings that Chuck, you mentioned that we have now, as in like keen to meet new people. And we were basically sharing stories and about how people now, like a Djokovic, right, probably has emerged as the champion of who knew everything and did right. But there's a very nice thread from American doctor. I'll just read it out because I think it is important. He basically says, you know why we intubated people for COVID in March 2020? Because otherwise people were going to die, full stop. I remember a patient rolling in with an OSATs of 42%, breathing twice as fast as normal, struggling to put on a face mask with oxygen all the way up. What to do? I am sick of seeing people trying to relitigate 2020 through the eyes of 2023. If you miraculously know everything now, why didn't you tell us so then? So over 1 million Americans didn't have to die of COVID. So we didn't have to put ourselves at risk every time we went to work. I don't care about the narrative you want to create from the safety of where you stand now. I think that is important, right?
Yeah.
Like, in terms of how it has ended, I think there's something called a peak end theory where like our recollection of an event is often colored by the way it ended. And to be honest,
Absolutely.
COVID kind of fizzled out, right? And you think that it was all like... But basically this shaken confidence in the scientific community, right? And in medicine is something, at least in the US, I'm guessing similar in India and around many sort of circles, is something that is probably a different thing from before COVID.
Yeah,
I'm not sure about in India. I always feel like the medical community was reasonably well respected in India, and my guess, and Naren, actually, you might be able to speak about this with more experience, and I'd like to think that because, well, let's say there's just more doctors around over here, or I think
for some reason, culturally we are not that anti-doctor. So in the US it's a big thing, right? So. Sort of the resting sort of thing is suspicion. So everyone is suspicious.
I also think pop culture in India has played a decent part in not demonizing doctors, or because the access here is
but
not.
But that said, we apparently do have a huge challenge in sort of other strata of society which aren't to which we don't belong, which have. A lot of irrational belief in non-science. They just believe anything. You take a couple of leaves and whatever fruits and make a concoction and drink it, and it cures cancer. People believe it.
There was a huge this thing, right? Like especially in rural India, there was this one. Which prevented a lot of people from taking vaccinations was that if you take the vaccine that you will become impotent, and that was just like this huge narrative that ran around, and like rural India actually like faced a massive problem of like people being averse to getting vaccinations because they were like, if you take the vaccine, you'll get important and stuff like that. And there was like a random rumor that came out of nowhere.
Correct.
Yeah.
Somebody would have said it in jest and, it just got amplified. Yeah.
Yeah.
There is this guy called the Liver Doc on Twitter.
Of course.
Yeah. So he has been, trying to spread awareness of the very dangerous beliefs that people have medically. A lot of it is, he is a liver specialist, and a lot of it is really bad for the liver. So a lot of these Ayurvedic medicines are bad. So
So that's what I was going to touch upon, right? I think the bigger problem in India is that we've always used everything together, right? A person going to a homeopath will also see
take allopathy,
real doctor and Ayurveda, whatever, and mix everything together. What has happened as a result of COVID, where there was so much uncertainty in between, is that now it's like, okay, you can try everything, right? Like, why stop it? It was not like, because obviously scientific studies take time to validate results and come out. In between, it was like a hit and trial kind of thing. I think we have the opposite problem where people might be like going for anything and everything.
You're putting the all in allopathic.
And that's where I think, Tony, the thing that you read with the doctor actually makes a lot of sense, because I mean, I was just watching this documentary about the Princess cruises that spread COVID in. They were part of the initial spread in Australia and stuff like that, right? There was so those.
I'm just saying.
I mean, they were talking about. I mean, that too was actually, it's been released recently, so it's. I mean, the release of the documentary is when almost in a post-COVID world, and that was like the COVID, like it was the beginning of the COVID thing, and like it's how the cruise operators now are trying to reverse the narrative that there was all this hysteria about the cruises being like petri dishes of COVID and all that stuff, and now it's not in some way or the other. And this documentary is actually like, the narrative of the documentary is trying to push back at that particular thing and saying, let's not have that small a memory that we don't remember what these cruises actually did and how they caused that public health crisis in the first place, right? Like, all of these guys are like, you know what, like COVID's gone, and now actually cruises never were part of the problem. It was just hysteria that caused it and all that shit. And like, again, when you have got the this thing of retrospect, and now that now that the story has gotten cold and the hysteria has died down, everything seems like it was hysteria back then, but it was actually a real fear. And it was actually, I mean, lack of social distancing and bunching people together was causing people to die. And like, older people together, a lot of older people together in a cruise is not a great idea when COVID is happening, right? So, I mean, that those are like fundamental things that you can't forget. And again, the politicization of how COVID, like post-COVID life has happened, and certain people coming out and saying that, you know what, like this hurt. Like, I mean, right now, I mean, with the lab leak theory of COVID also, I mean, there is credence to that. And for sure, there could have been some level to that.
Or it's not been disproved fully.
Yeah, but now, like, it's almost like the right-wing people were like, we were right all along. And I'm like, no, there were a few million people who died in the middle. Right? Let's not forget about those guys. So, yeah.
So basically, to conclude, a lot has changed, a lot remains the same, and a lot remains unknown. It also, while we were saying all this, right?
Paraphrase Sam Goldwyn of Metro Goldwyn Mayer, we have passed a lot of water since then. Yeah.
I think that's a nice place to kind of end this. This episode kind of felt like, greatest hits of the last 2-3 years, the things that we have spoken about. We went from physical and, physical and philosophical to, medical, and quietly in there we snuck in blockchain without really understanding what it was. So I think this kind of summed up things quite nicely. So Naren, get us out of this COVID thing with the usual
grace and nobility.
Yeah, this is a tough one. Stay safe. Stay uninfected.
And stay safe.
Stay safe. Let's just keep it as stay safe. Stay safe and stay.
Just stay.
Yeah, stay. Stay.
Like a dog. Stay.